What's good, gamers? My name is Dr. Ryan Terrell, PsychSensei here for another show, episode experience, whatever you want to call it. Welcome to The Construct. It's a homage to the Matrix, for sure, a loading program that you can load anything you want into the construct and then you can practice it. If you have noticed, I do not have any hair anymore. I definitely got fed up with it and said, I'm going to shave it. And so I did. Is it a mistake? Maybe. At the same time, this is what I'm thinking. This will always grow back. Another thing I was thinking about is what happens if people make comments or say anything or whatever, but at the end of the day, dude, it's my head and I can do whatever I want to do with my head, and as long as I like the way that my head looks, and even if I don't, whatever, dude, it's still my head. As I'm talking to different players, different people, different coaches, something that I'm hearing a lot of, they're worried about what other people will think about them, about their elo, about what they say, about how they would look, what happens if I fail. And I think the biggest thing is as long as you accept it and as long as you can grow through it, or you like it, or you're okay with it, what does it matter? In this sense, you can be invincible. And in this moment, I've definitely chosen to shave my head. If I hit partner, I'll do it again. If I hit 100 followers, I'll do it again, man. Doing something that is difficult or challenging for yourself and being willing to put yourself through that process and going through it, I think that's even more powerful than what happens on the first step. Because honestly, like my hair, it's gonna grow back. Like most people feeling failure or whatever's, did you die? No. Your confidence will grow back. Your attitude will grow back. All these things are ephemeral. They are short. They are short lasting. And if you think about it, that's why shooting stars and rainbows and cherry blossoms are so beautiful, is because they don't last very long. So while we are in this moment, I encourage you to honestly shave your head. Go for it, man. Do those things that you're afraid to do, because at the end of the day, as long as you're happy and as long as you're growing through it, that's all that matters. And what people think about you and what people may say about how weird my head looks, or that I have a square head maybe, or that I have a whatever, bro, it doesn't matter. It's my head and I can do whatever I want with it. And at the very least, my hair will grow back and everything will be fine. In that way, don't worry about it. I encourage everyone to go make a change. Go shave your head. Go do that thing. Go be brave. I'm so excited to hear about the story that comes about it. Even if you're self-conscious at first about what happens, I'm sure that you'll have a great experience, a good story, and lots of lessons learned from it. That is my reverse positive message of the day. If you're new to the show, welcome. And if you're not, dude, welcome back. What I like to do is I like to read articles and give you some hot takes about what these articles are saying and how you may apply it to your life or your journey in esports. Another thing I like to do is model the Pomodoro technique. Basically, it is a time management technique that will help you get things done efficiently, effectively, with some rest. It's a very simple system. All you need to do is set a timer, set a goal, work through that timer. Once the timer goes up, so we'll take a break. I'll explain a little bit more about what I think about the article, maybe field some more questions and comments in the chat. You'll hear another ding and I'll jump into the article for another cycle. My Pomodoro cycles are 20 minutes long because my attention span is quite short, but if you can do it longer, that's awesome. Please, 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 please put your comments, your questions, your ideas in this chat box. It is super fun for me to see them all, talk with you, and to help you more specifically in your game or your experience or whatever you're doing. This is where the action lives. Please chat to me. I get bored. I don't, but it's more fun when you guys talk with me. Without any further ado, how about we just jump into it? Today's article is entitled Between a Troll and a Hard Place, the Demand Framework's Answer to One of Gaming's Biggest Problems. I'm really interested in this. I've encountered a troll. I might have been a troll. I would really love to see if there's some science behind trolling and being a troll, so I'm stoked. This article was done more recently in 2019. The present article aims to expand this framework and apply it to problematic gaming, also known as trolling. Interesting that they labeled problematic gaming as trolling versus problematic gaming typically being associated with addiction or overplaying or stuff like that. This present study marries theory and trolling research by closely examining interdisciplinary empirical evidence from a single platform, video games, and applying the various forms of demand to propose a testable dual route model of trolling behavior. They argue for two primary causal mechanisms that can lead to trolling. One, demand imbalance between players in the game, and two, demand imbalance between players. So players in game and player. I want to see this science and how this goes. Demand framework presented by Bowman, 2018. So there are 4 demands according to Bowman: cognitive, emotional, social, and physical. There are all these demands. Maybe not physical, but maybe physical is more as the mechanics of the game, I'm guessing. Although this research is beneficial for many gamers, in reality, not all gamers are striving for an optimal experience. In fact, there has been a recent explosion of literature concerning gamers who seek the opposite for both themselves and players among the game. Trolls. I think this is really important. The definition of trolling, the understanding of what trolling and being a troll means is a very broad action and definition. Here are the behaviors. Comprising behaviors traditionally associated with griefing culture. Interesting that there's a word for it. As well as more lighthearted jabs and jokes. Trolling is an umbrella term that refers to the instrumental use of the game, website, or chat mechanics at another person's expense, though it finds its roots to be both practical jokes and boundary maintenance practices in niche communities. Meeting the game's cognitive and physical demands, a troll might fling their avatar in front of a poorly aimed shot in order to die, thus disadvantaging their team. So in conclusion, there's a lot of ways to be a troll. Emotionally victimize a vulnerable streamer. Interesting that they stated this fact that trolling can be an enjoyable activity, usually between friends, maybe not so much if you're not friends. So it does seem that there is some type of relational context for trolling. I guess that's for fun with your friends, but if it's at the cost of other people that you don't know, maybe that's more insidious. Conceptualizing demands and trolling in games. Interaction is their key to their operationalization. I kind of like this, the difference between mechanics and demands, because I do think that there is a difference between mechanics and demands. I think why they're studying mechanics more, what they're saying is because it's easier to see versus understanding the demands of the game or demands of the player, because that's a little more deeper and constantly changing. They're defining trolling as a behavior, or emphasizing the behavior of trolling, as trolling within a game context also covers any action. So we're really looking at actions and behaviors that are at the heart of a troll, is their actions and behaviors. I'm really interested to see what they say, the motivations and the motivational pieces they address in trolling. However, I'll stick with behaviors because that's the easiest thing to see, is the behaviors of a troll for sure. Because we're going cognitive, social, emotional, and physical. So we've covered behaviors, now we're going to physical. Physical demands present perhaps the most obvious case of behavior resulting from in-game demands. Ooh, I like this. In order to understand how demand theory can explain trolls and trolling, first have to understand trolls' goals. It's true, because what they're trying to say here is that the goal of a troll is not to play optimally or finish the game. So what are then the goals of a troll? 2.1, goal alignment and co-creation in relation to troll practices. Trolls' goals only sometimes align with that of developers, because the developers want them to play it in a certain way, but the trolls want to play with different goals in mind. They went over these 4 different areas: cognitive, emotional, social, and physical. Cognitive is the extent to which the user is required to implicitly or explicitly rationalize or understand the game. So how you think about the game, they're meant to model your understanding of the game. This is the trolls example: increasing cognitive demand by thwarting one's team's strategy to win by purposely killing one's own character. You have to understand the game and then twist it so you can jack the game up. Emotionally, it says the extent to which a video game causes the user to have an implicit or explicit affective response to the game, so an emotional response to the game. And then the trolling example is increased emotional demand by hurling personal insults at a teammate or enemy. So they're trying to use their emotions to influence the game. Social, the extent to which a system or actor triggers an implicit or explicit response in the user to the presence of other social actors. The troll example is increasing social demand by spamming in the chat window. And lastly, physical is the extent to which a system requires the user to exert discrete or holistic physical effort. The trolling example is reducing physical demand by abusing a glitch to become invulnerable in-game. These make me think that it takes more cognitive energy to troll than to do what you're supposed to do. So I think trolling equals increased cog demand. And because of this, and also because of the goals, I think this actually takes more work. To be a good troll, you have to understand how the game works so you can actively not do that thing and work towards your own goals. Also, to have the emotional piece, you have to really channel those emotions so you can really make other people feel them or really push other people's buttons, so it takes more energy for you to actually know somebody. And then the social piece is you just doing stuff extra, chatting in and pinging and doing other stuff, and then physically doing stuff to like jack up the game. Being a troll, it takes a lot of work, which is really interesting. And if that's the case, then dude, what happens if you actually used your powers for good than for evil? Trolling behaviors that are motivated by revenge or interaction seeking, for example, can simply ignore the demands presented by the game, using the mechanics to achieve goals independent of the games. So now we're looking at motivation, intent of a troll. See, to beat the troll, you have to understand the troll. Trolling motivated by personal goals that do not involve winning the game looks like more situation C. In this case, trolling is a breakdown of the co-creation that typifies normal gameplay. If the player's goals and the game's goals are separate, that makes sense. It seems like a troll. This is a very loose association. So what they're saying is basically in situation B, the developer's goals is for fun and enjoyment. And in the troll's goals are for fun and enjoyment. But they're going to fun and enjoyment for different ways. Like the developer is trying to create this experience or this game so people people can have fun and enjoyment in this context, where a troll is actively trying to jack up the goals of the game, but by doing so is making themselves have fun and enjoyment. By that transitive property, I can see why they would say that the common goal between situation A and B is that everyone is trying to have fun, just in different ways of having fun. The question then becomes, how do demands cause trolling when the players and developers' goals are mostly aligned? I mean, they're not mostly aligned, I would say. I mean, they're kind of aligned, but I don't know. I don't think they're aligned that much, because I think if the reason why a troll is being a troll is for their own personal enjoyment, and I'd say, yeah, sure, maybe that's why people are playing the video game, for their own personal enjoyment, but at the same time, it feels like trolls have much more of a selfish motivation of what they think fun and enjoyment is, because they're not playing how the game is supposed to be intended. Ooh, what is flow theory? According to flow theory, people can achieve a state of flow in which they feel focused, calm, and able to succeed. I thought they're going to go somewhere else instead of like literal flow. Being in the zone, being in the flow, being that perfect state of like everything is clicking, that's flow. The opposite of flow is tilt. Just as flow is a balancing act between challenge and level, straying too far in one direction, either excessive skill or excessive challenge, can lead a person into the tilted headspace that often precedes trolling. If that's true, then, if tilt is a precursor to trolling, then what trolling is, oh my god, this makes so much sense. Then what trolling is, trolling and tilt, this is emotional / cognitive dysregulation. So what this article is highlighting for me is that if tilt is the precursor to trolling behavior, then that would make me think that trolling is a hiccup with this here, and your ability to think and keep these bad boys online. Because essentially tilt is the shutting down of this, and then we just think emotionally. So if that's true of trolling, then also trolling is a emotional or cognitive moment of dysregulation where you're trying to meet your own emotional needs to make yourself feel better. Tilt, trolling, we're talking about frontal lobes, executive functioning. That's all it is. Makes total sense. Because I mean, if you want to also relate flow state to frontal lobes, flow state really in actuality is everything is running smoothly in your frontal lobes. You can think clearly, it feels good, your thoughts are just smooth. You have a sense of like, oh, I know what to do in this moment because, dude, the connection between both frontal lobes are like chef's kiss, perfect. There is no one optimal state, but rather what Chen 2006 calls a fuzzy zone in which players can experience this feeling of flow, allowing them to work harder or work safer to have fun. That's really, really interesting that flow state is like this is the state, but there's a range of what that state could feel like. When you're in that zone, you can perform at a higher level. I think too, what's really, really interesting is that it's all about balance in this thing. I'm sure that state is kind of temperamental, so being able to balance and maintain it, it's kind of like having a plate on a stick and you're trying to spin it. It's all about balancing it there and keeping it going. If I were to guess, I would guess that keeping yourself balanced in that state has something to do with emotional cognitive regulation and executive function regulation. That is my bell. So I'm gonna make this transition to stretch. I never really thought of trolling as a executive function thing, but it makes sense. If they're saying that tilt is one of the precursors to trolling, it would make sense why it's an emotional cognitive hiccup in your frontal lobes. But I also think that it's very interesting that they picked out the different types of motivational factors for trolling, where the goals of a troll is kind of similar, or the goals have to behave within the context of the game. But at the same time, as a troll, then you also need to think about how you're going to act and behave in a certain manner to still be within the context of the game, but at the same time, you're doing something actively different that is against the goals of the game. So in that sense, you're actually using more cognitive resources to be a troll than not. Really, that's kind of what it's about. If you're a troll, you definitely take more energy. For all of you out there, if you guys want to take a break and if you want to do some stretching with me, I think it's really helpful and useful that we all take breaks and stretch, because if we're talking about cognitive and emotional regulation and to be less trolly or to get less tilted or whatever, it's important that you give yourself breaks, because when you give yourself breaks, think of like running. You can only run for so long at a high pace or a very good speed, but after that you get tired. And then after that, if you take a break, you can rest and recover, and then you can continue sprinting. Your mind kind of works the same way. Or if you're working on a project, or in fact, if you're playing a game, which takes, I don't know, all these articles on esports say that playing games is a very cognitively taxing activity. So if you're using your brain a lot, how do you expect to run at that pace if you don't take breaks? So also the reason why you want to stretch is because your body's connected to your brain. Body feel bad, brain work bad too. Drinking water, taking a stretch break, getting up, looking farther off in the distance for your eyeballs. I think these are all important if you want to continue to use your brain at a high level. For you students out there, same thing. When you study, it's important that you take breaks from your studying so you don't burn yourself out, and or you can continue to process and store information and encode that information so it can get to long-term memory. If not, you're just finding patterns of how to respond to stuff. You're not actually learning. So that's why it's important that we all take breaks. The more breaks that we take, the less trolly we'll be. I guess trolling in real life would be kind of just like, I don't know, using humor and being a dick, or being in a really bad mood and then just like amping out on people. That's pretty troll. If trolling is a emotional and cognitive thing, then we need to do things like take breaks or drink water or eat things or whatever to make sure that we can continue to function and think at a high level. I mean, all this makes sense. Like Among Us, this applies to that game, this applies to studying, taking the SATs, all these things. That is the silent ding. Shwoop! Back into it. Although arguably less research than cognitive and physical demands, the same could be said of social and emotional demands in games. Although instead of skill or proficiency interacting with challenge, it is more of a personal tolerance level and a current state of being. And you know what affects tolerance level and state of being? Cog fatigue. Whoop. So I guess too, now that I'm reading this, it really goes down to why are you playing the games you're playing, or why are you doing the things you do? For example, if you're playing a game and you're being just tilted and you want to troll, then that's fine, because at least you're intentionally going into the game to troll. But if you're not having a purpose and you're just trolling just to troll, then you're not playing the game. Flow theory describes an optimal zone of functioning. Demand theory is currently being used in the same way to describe the optimal range of a demand in a game. Oh my god. Do you know what this is? Do you know what this is right here, boys and girls? This is the gamer version of the Yerkes-Dodson stress model. Holy crap, that's what this is, man. It's literally verbatim. It's literally verbatim. Stress, I guess, equals demands. For the Yerkes-Dodson, it look exactly like this same curve, but instead of demand at the bottom, you have arousal. Arousal equals stress. We're not gonna say stress, it's arousal. And over here on this side would be performance. So it looked like this too. So basically what the Yerkes-Dodson stress model says is that you need arousal, you need stress, you need something to help you move. It says the more arousal you have at a certain point, you'll peak out, and that's perfect performance. You have just enough stress to make you move, make you a little more sharper, but as soon as you have too much arousal, for example, I have 5 papers, a test, and a midterm tomorrow, or I have all this and a game, if I have too much, my performance is beginning to dip. But at the same time, I have nothing to do. I'm stuck in quarantine, all my friends are gone, I have nothing. You're not gonna move. You have no arousal to push you. So performance will also dip. What this basically says is that balance, demand, whatever, arousal, you need some of it. Just because demands are there doesn't mean that they're bad. They help you move. Interesting how the stress curve and demands are the same with flow state. So the middle equals the flow zone, in which players are able to meet the cognitive and physical challenges of the game and have a positive social, emotional experience playing the game. This is big. However, when these 4 demand types are either excessive or too limited when interactions with the player's skill and state imbalanced, I hypothesize that players will be prone to exhibit trolling behavior. Makes sense to me. If there's not enough demands and I'm bored, I'm going to use my cognitive facilities or energies to jack the game up because I'm bored. That makes so much sense. Like kids in a classroom, if the class is too easy, they're going to run around, they're going to disrupt people because they're done with their work. This is too easy. But at the same time, if it's too much on the other end and it's too hard and not learning anything anyway, I'm going to be frustrated and I'm going to act frustrated and act out. Isn't it weird how this all makes sense? School, games. You know what the common factor is and why it's so similar? That's why. People be people, yo. Boredom and frustration. Oh my god, boredom and frustration. I wonder how many of these kids that are bored and frustrated were also bored and frustrated in school, in like elementary school. It seems like trolls need to be smart to be good trolls. And that kind of reminds me about like something I've heard about humor, where humor is a mix between intellect and anger. Because to make something funny, you have to be smart, but at the same time, there is a little bit of oomph, or like, oh, I didn't think that you're gonna say that factor. So you have to think a little harder to be more funny. So if you're funny, cheers, man, you're smart. So it's confirmed by other studies that behavior was the second most popular catalyst for trolling. Trolls reported that at a certain point, they became so proficient at the game that the game itself was no longer exciting enough to keep their attention. Makes sense. Flow wasn't able to create enough challenge for an optimal experience. while several other studies cited that the #1 goal motivation for trolling is personal enjoyment. For the lulz! Putting that in quotes. Oh my god, for the lulz XD. You know, this makes me think, if you're bored in the game, you've stopped using your brain. There's like an underutilization of your brain, because if you're bored, you think you've learned everything. At the same time, I think the beauty of esports and games is that there's always more stuff to learn, there's always more stuff to pick up, but then the question is, how much do you want to try to learn? Or force yourself to be active in your thinking. I think that's much more harder to do than saying, I'm just bored. Frustration, all right? On the other side of boredness is frustration. When the game demands too much of the player, exceeding their capabilities at the time, or pushing them too far emotionally or socially. Overwhelmed, being overwhelmed. But again, interestingly, that the motivation here is for personal pleasure. And I would think that this is almost like self-soothing. Another thing that I'm thinking about, if this is the precursor to tilt and you're bored, I think this has something to do with self-preservation. And the reason I'm saying that trolling out of boredom is some type of self-preservation is because I'm guessing that if you're trolling when you're bored, you're not doing so hot. In either way, you're probably not doing so hot, or you're doing not so hot on purpose, which either is like a self-protection. I can just hear some trolls saying, oh, if I only tried, I'd be better. I could do better. Or this game is too easy. That's why I'm trying to make it harder. Like all of these statements with trolls, there is some type of self-preservation, some self-soothing, some ego protection going on. Because if you're really good at the game, or if you really dedicated yourself to this craft, I would guess that even if you like lose, win, whatever, you would be strong in that ego where it's okay, I'm always improving, I'm always moving forward. I mean, yes, what they're saying is that trolling behavior comes out of boredom and frustration and self-satisfaction. But notice the reasons for these things is not satisfaction in improving the game. Instead, it's more shallow and I'd say a little more selfish, where it's like, I'm doing these behaviors to make me feel good at the cost of others so I can protect myself. So in that sense, man, like I understand why people troll, but at the same time, I just feel bad for trolls now. Or I'm having more empathy for trolls. I'm thinking about when I'm trolling too, I'm sucking real bad, and then I get toxic and troll. Maybe that's a personal experience, but if I had to guess, that seems what it's about. Self-preservation, ego protection, and some type of self-soothing behavior. Some type of something for the troll to protect themselves. Even though outwardly they're coming off as someone very strong, because I'm thinking about the language they might be using, I'm trying to think of the behaviors they might be doing, very strong and confident, and have the presentation of being some way, but internally not feeling the same. Really, I'm having more empathy for trolls. I like this. They reinforce the taxonomy of trolling triggers being on tilt. This shuts off. Did I not write down emotional regulation? When the game's demands are excessive, the player can experience an emotional state that has been listed as a common precursor to trolling behavior. I do also agree with that point that if you're probably in a flow state and you are playing very well, you're less likely to troll because you're focused on the game and you're playing it to win or whatever. You're playing it to your own win condition versus someone being on tilt and trying to self-soothe by making other people feel bad so they can feel better about themselves. Funny thought, as I say that out loud, oh man, people are just putting people down so they can raise themselves up. Yo, I guess then trolling has been happening since the beginning of school, like recesses and bullying, honestly, in that sense. Because it's so funny, when I think of these concepts, I always think about little kids. I can hear a teacher telling this to a kid where it's like, oh, bullies are just putting people down to make them feel better about themselves. And I think trolling is like the grown-up gamer version of that statement. Really, it's like trolls are going to do things to make them feel better at the cost of you, but they're just really hurting people, or frustrated or bored people hurting people for their own self-goodness feeling. And you know what, honestly, I'd agree with that, because I'm thinking about when I've trolled or participated in this type of behavior, why did I do it? And I was like, I wanted to make the experience of other people's game bad because they were irritating me or whatever. I'm guilty of this too, for sure. I'm human. I wish I could have like the strongest mental ever, but I'm fallible, just like everyone else. 3.1, demands imbalance, player versus game. Which particular game demands need to be excessive or lacking to cause trolling behavior? Just the way this is written is kind of brutal. Trolls are often veteran players who prey on the inexperienced. Ugh, that just feels dirty. Yes, see, trolls are smart. This would suggest that trolls have a high degree of mastery. Because like I said, you have to understand how the game works to break it. Thus, you need to have a good grasp of the knowledge about the game to be an effective troll. Trolls often claim that the game itself is no longer presenting a challenge. Claimed. These type of sentences make me think of ego protection. Oh, this game's too easy. I'm just bored. That's why I'm doing it. Or are you not trying? And because you're not trying, it's gotten bored. Because if it really was that easy, why aren't you the highest you can go? Oh, because I don't want to. Well, why don't you want to? You know, this just takes so much work. Okay, so then it's hard and it's difficult and it's frustrating. That's why you don't want to do it. No, I just don't feel like it, man. Oh my god, the generational gap in trolling. Divided into two types, veterans and kids. Veterans say they've exceeded the game's demands, while the kids often called squeakers due to their high-pitched voices or voice chat. So cute. I think that's the end of the 20 minutes, and I really kind of want to save the rest of this article to go through. This article really made me think about a lot. What I really like is that this article has made me think about and seen the motivations of trolls, the boredom and frustration. That makes sense. It was really interesting to see that graph of like demands of the game and how it looked like the Yerkes-Dawson stress model, which makes sense because I mean, like, when you're talking about games, when you're talking about demands of the game, what you're talking about is learning. And learning is frustrating, and it takes some like cognitive demands to actually learn something, and it needs arousal, it needs stress to learn. Makes sense. At the same time, it's very interesting to hear why trolls do what they do if they're so smart, and then you kind of use their own logic against them. Like, okay, if it's so easy, then how come you are not at the pinnacle? And then if you are, why are you choosing to be kind of a jerk or use this knowledge or your power for not improving the landscape of the game that you apparently think is too easy? At the same time, I get that if you're frustrated, why that would go there. I think when people become frustrated, they can't really access stuff as easily as when people are bored. So I think it'd be different to address the frustrated people than the bored people. This article has been super interesting about trolls. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for stopping by. The positive message for today: you're so powerful. I think people forget how much power they have and how much time and effort they actually have to use in a positive and more helpful way for themselves. If you're bored or if you're frustrated, I get it. At the same time, what we're talking about is we're talking about emotional cognitive regulation. If you're bored, what are some things that you can do to make the game more interesting for yourself and have you stop learning in the game? And if you're frustrated, dude, take a break. Take a load off, man. Set yourself some boundaries. Don't play that next game for sure. Take a breath. Understand that you're still learning. Everyone's still learning at this game. And I'm sure once you learn how to regulate yourself and your thoughts and your emotions, the game's gonna become a little more fun. Or you're frustrating because you're learning, and that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, because that's what games are all about. It's about learning, improving, and getting to that next level. Well, on that note, as always, my name is Dr. Ryan Terrell, your PsychSensei, teaching you how to think, play, and slay. One article, one day, one break at a time. All right, friends, take it easy. Peace.